Hey folks, I'm back to talk to you a little bit more about color now. What I'm doing right here is I'm deleting my sketch layer by holding down on the layer for an excess of 2 seconds, and then a big prompt window comes up to delete it. What I'm doing now is I'm making my brush 100% in thickness and I'm manually coloring in, but there are more efficient ways of doing it. For one, you can go to your lasso tool, select the area that you like to color in, and then once you fill it, go to your bucket tool and fill in with the color. It's much faster, much more efficient. What I'm also doing is I'm doing a little gradient action here. I'm using my magic wand to select that color, getting a darker color here, and I just added a nice little gradient in there to add a little bit of a shadow effect. Now I'm just filling in the blanks. If you notice, I'm holding down on a specific color for just a second or two, and that color actually pops up in my swatch, so you don't have to keep going back and forth to the swatches. And now what I'm doing is I'm just adding in a bluish gray, a cool gray for the highlights of John's hair here. And now I'm going to go in and I'm going to color in his eyes and his teeth. I'm just using straight up white. The best thing about these swatches here is you can actually preset your own colors. That's what I have for my live events. I have a preset swatch that I access and use when I'm coloring in people. It makes things much more efficient and a lot quicker. And what I'm doing now is I'm just trying to get a good tone here for the lips. Going to the upper lip here. Generally, you want to make the upper lip a little bit darker than the lower lip. But if you want to save time, just go ahead and make it the same color, and then you can add in a few bits of shading a little bit later. Just like that. Alright, so what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to get into those tight spaces with the gums. If you notice, I'm zooming in a lot, just knocked down my pen tool to a very, very small setting there. And as you can see, if I go outside of the lines, I can always correct it by going to the previous color. Alright, so what I'm doing now is I'm going to my magic wand tool. I'm going to add a little bit of a gradient to the teeth just to show that there's a little bit of a shadow on the top there. If you see there, you can actually do color to transparent, which means it's just the color you want going into the color you've already established. So what I'm doing is I'm just using a gray and just adds a nice little shadow there to the white, just like that. And now I'm just coloring in the shirt. While I'm doing this, I just want to tell you that when you are using the lasso tool and you want to deselect it, the easiest way to do that is there's a box tool, which is 2 to the left from the lasso. If you click on that and then click back on the screen, it'll deselect the lasso. Otherwise, you'll have a hard time getting rid of it. Alright, just filling in any spots I missed. The lasso's nice, but it doesn't always get everything. And there we go. So now I got all my base colors in here. I'm actually going to go a layer above it now, and I'm going to put in some of my shading. I typically like to go bold with the shading. I like to hit all my really dark spots first. I typically will not go with the paint can or the airbrush tool until after the fact. So what I'm doing right now is I'm just keying out all my heavy shading, all my dark areas, just to make it a little bit more graphic. It also pops a lot more when you actually print it out and email it. And so it's something that's not really new to any of you guys. If you've been drawing caricatures for a number of years, you usually know where you want to lay down your darkness and where you want to keep the areas of the face light. One cool effect is, though, when you are actually coloring over a gradient, the gradient complements it really well. Now what I'm doing is I got my airbrush tool, I've kicked my opacity down, and I'm just adding a little bit of a almost like a gradient on top of my base darkness right there, my base shading. So it's got a little bit of a softer feel, kind of brings it all together. And now I'm going one more layer above. I'm going to add just a little bit of red to the nose and to the ears. It just adds a nice little splash of color and kind of makes the caricature pop just a little bit more. Adds a little sense of, I'm not going to say realism, but you know, we always collect lots of blood, or when we get cold or hot, it's usually our ears and our noses that are the first things that turn red. Now I just got my highlights in. I'm on the topmost layer now. I'm using my airbrush tool and I have the opacity down. Not too hot on that white, so I'm actually kicking my opacity down more, adding a little bit of a glare there to make it pop a little bit. And it's pretty easy to do. You can add it to your topmost layer, or you just add it to a layer directly below your line work. And just adding a little bit of blending to the shirt there. And you remember when I mentioned keep your bottommost layer blank? This is why. You pick a color, do a gradient to transparent, and boom, got a nice little aquamarine blue into the white there. And of course, most important of all, these people want to know that this is going to be worth money when you're dead, so sign it. And there you go. And last minute addition here, adding a little glare to the lip. That was a little too bold, a little too much, so I'm making it a lot softer. There we go. And there we go.